from the heart of Dubai, where tomorrow is being built today, to the world. Welcome to the CTO Show with Mehmet. Here, we redefine technology and reimagine possibilities. With Mehmet, delve into the riveting realms of AI, cybersecurity, and digital technology. Experience the thrilling highs and lows of startups. Immerse yourself in the spirit of entrepreneurship and witness the future of business innovation being written in real time. Now, without further ado, let's tune in and explore the future.
Hello and welcome back to a new episode of the CTO Show with Mehmet. Today I'm very pleased. Joining me, Matt Van Itallie. Matt, thank you very much. It's so early for you over there in the East Coast of the United States. So thank you for making the time. The way I love to do it is I like my guests to introduce themselves, tell us a little bit more about their journey, and what you are currently up to. So the floor is yours, Matt.
Mehmet, thank you so much. And this is absolutely worth getting up early to talk to you. I'm honored to do it. So, of course, I'm Matt Van Itallie, grew up in upstate New York. I'm the son of a math teacher and a computer programmer. I say that because what SEMA has done with our business is treat code as data. So I wonder if it was in the water for me to ultimately have this job, although it's been quite a path to get here. I was a coder early, as a kid, learned BASIC. Some of your audiences remember that language. But was not a professional coder. Instead, I went off to the side of management and strategy and operations. Management consultant, I worked in government reform. I got to enterprise software and just fell in love with understanding and improving software teams and software organizations. And I started SEMA 7 years ago because I was so passionate about the need to bridge the gap between tech and non-tech. What do I mean by that? Everyone listening to your show is, I'm sure, very familiar with Salesforce and other CRMs. Those are great tools for individual coders, but they're also executive tools. The chief revenue officer can use it to explain the state of sales and the state of the sales team to the rest of the C-suite, to the boards of directors. So there's an executive level insight into sales, thanks to code, of course. And there was not, and arguably still isn't in certain respects, executive insight into code, thanks to code. And that was such an interesting logical problem, such an important problem, because when tech and non-tech teams don't understand each other, less great things happen. And so we started SEMA to help tackle this problem, and it's been 7 wonderful years. And today we do 2 things. We help understand and explain tech in what we call moments of evaluation, like technical due diligence, the buying and selling of software assets. And we help companies manage how their coders are using Gen AI to get the maximum ROI from using those Gen AI tools, while also minimizing the risks.
That's fantastic. We have a lot to cover, Matt, because one of the reasons this show exists, to be very frank with you, is because I like this intersection of business and technology. And, you just gave a, brilliant example of Salesforce, which is a software that usually salespeople use. Like I use it also. I used to use it as well. Yeah. And this intersection of both worlds, it's like really, really important. And you mentioned technical due diligence. And technical due diligence, so usually people in I would say as you mentioned, transaction-based software selling, like investment, merger and acquisition. So when they think about technical due diligence, they might think, okay, it's just, checking the quality of a software. But what I want you, Matt, to explain to us and to the audience, of course, when we say technical due diligence, when it comes to, a company that is planning to acquire another company that developed a software, or for example, an investor who's deciding to put money in a startup that developed something. So why it's important to have this technical due diligence? And, from your experience, what would be like some common red flags, in the code to whether the buyer or the investor?
Wonderful. You asked two great questions. I'm going to add a third. So first, why do technical due diligence? The extra one is, what is technical due diligence? Right. Just so your audience can hear the full taxonomy. And then the third is some red flags. So first, why do technical due diligence? There are two phases when it matters. One is before the decision is made, so actually deciding whether to make a go or no-go decision in the investment or acquisition, as you said. And the other benefit from doing technical due diligence is post-close, what you could call value creation, or just the next phase. The reason to do technical due diligence before making the decision is some companies, it's pretty rare, but some companies have so many challenges with the state of the code base, and we'll talk about what some of those red flags are, that it makes sense to not do the deal. Examples could be you end up having to spend so much money and time and effort trying to take the code base to the state it needs to be that you would have been better off not making the investment in the first place. We like to say that in that phase, it's a 1 or 0 decision. So extremely uncommon to say, well, the tech isn't perfect. It's not that tech should be perfect, but the tech isn't good enough to go through a deal, but it's almost there. So we want to take $10 million off the purchase price. That's not how it happens. You either pass tech due diligence or you don't, which is why being ready for sellers and folks seeking investment to be ready for that, you need to pass. It's not. There's no gradation. So it's a really high stakes decision, even though most companies pass. The other reason is that because most of these deals pass, the vast majority, by the time you're doing tech due diligence, it's likely confirmatory, is that it's an incredible opportunity to plan for the future. And so our clients, but not just our clients, everybody, if you find findings, let's say you find security warnings in the technical due diligence, which, by the way, all companies have security warnings. That's not a reason on itself to kill a deal. Well, you have the work plan on what the company should do post-close, post-investment. And so it's getting ready for the next step. So those are the two reasons why, or when I should say, technical due diligence matters. What is technical due diligence? So just very briefly, in our world, this is about the portion of an organization that has software developers, either because it's a software company or it's a company with software assets. If you think about that, that's almost every company on earth, because if software is eating the world, then almost every company has been eaten at least a little bit by software. So it could be financial services, it could be pharmaceutical distribution. But what we're talking about is if the company has coders, either in-house or third-party development shops, technical due diligence doesn't apply to COTS, if you're just using commercial off-the-shelf software. In that world, technical due diligence is about functional assessment and non-functional assessment. Functional assessment is, what does the product do? How well does it do it? And what is the match or lack of match between current product and future product, meaning the roadmap, and customer requirements and preferences? The other part is non-functional requirements, and that is how the code base does what it does. Within that, there are many sections. It includes code quality, like the architecture, like how much testing there is. Those are some examples. It includes legal risk. That's actually one of the most important ones. Lawyers in transactions really care, and so sellers or targets have to be able to explain their use of open source code, which, while of course is prevalent, it comes with legal risk if you use it the wrong way. And so open source legal risk review is a huge part of technical due diligence. But real non-functional requirements and really thinking about the code base goes beyond the code itself, which is why we don't say code base, we say code. And this leads to the third example of the third question, which is, what are some of the red flags associated with technical due diligence? What are the reasons why organizations don't pass? There's really two situations. One is, if you think of a scorecard or a set of traffic lights, everything is red or orange, which is to say there's high risk and high cost to improve the code across all of these facets of these non-functional requirements. But the other one, and one that I'm really partial to, because I like to think that we've had a small role in helping non-technical teams and deal teams understand this. The single most important factor in whether or not a code base passes technical due diligence. Mehmet, do you want to guess? It's not intuitive. It's not intuitive, but once you hear it, you'll say, oh, absolutely.
What's it?
It is the presence or the absence for the risk of enough coders still working at the business who understand the code.
Oh,
yeah.
Mm.
So we say code base because the code base is so much more than the code is written. It is actually the process, the developers, etc. And so I know many of your audience members know this, but we like to say that having the code, the lines of code itself, without having key contributors who understand the code, is like having a half-written novel without the novelist. So code is never done. It is a journey. You're going to have to clean it up. You're going to have to add features and functionality. It is a work in progress. And losing engineers who have the subject matter expertise in the code, losing too many of them means it's almost impossible to recover from. And so the single most important factor, the single biggest red flag, if you had to pick one, is having all of the major developers of a code base leave in advance of the deal.
I'm trying to make a similarity. It's like you have a GPS navigator, but the satellite is turned off, right? So something like this. So you have the device, but you don't have the whatever that makes the device works.
Exactly. It may be, if I could, it's like having the GPS device, but no driver.
For example, here you go.
Right.
And I think, this is underrated, I would call it, Matt, because I remember that maybe more than 10 years ago, maybe even 15 years ago. So I used to get involved in these conversations where usually people trying to outsource the coding of, especially, because the mobile app was the new thing at that time, and, they used to write in their, when they're requesting for people to submit, is I want to have access to the code or something like this. And it's really funny because I used to tell them, okay, if you have the code but you don't know what to do with it, what's the use? Right? And from my experience, what I have seen also, I'm not a coder also myself. I know how to code, but I don't claim I'm a coder. I never, did it professionally. But the thing also I say, what I hear from coders, it's very hard, even if you have proper documentation, to understand it. It's gonna take time. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's gonna take time. So Matt, this is very interesting, but this is, to me, something which should be proactive, not a active act. I mean, the due diligence. So when you talk to CTOs, I think you're I would say the people who must worry about it are the CTOs the most, right? And even maybe the CEOs. So do they see this as a necessity only for the sake of an evaluation, or maybe, or do they understand that this is real risk for their business? Do you see this is something that is evolving?
Yeah, it's a great question. Thankfully for for the state of the CTOs and for their organizations, almost every CTO understands that we've spoken with, and SEMA's worked with more than 1,000 organizations. We've looked at more than $1 trillion worth of code, all the way from one-person organizations to public companies. So we've seen the range. Almost every CTO understands the importance of understanding and improving, or at least managing, let's say, understanding and managing the state of the code base, not just for the purposes of diligence, but because it's the right thing to do ongoing. And, if you take, anything more than the smallest of companies where all they're working on is product market fit, and they should, and just working on the functional requirements. Can they build something that somebody cares about? Which, of course, is an incredibly hard problem, and they should be focusing on that. Beyond that stage, every organization software organization on earth has some degree of concern about non-functional requirements. You see that in the prevalence of code quality tools in the SDLC, sometimes open source legal or security risk tools in the SDLC, code quality tools, etc. Of course, you see it through code reviews, etc. If I could wave a magic wand, you didn't ask, but I'll answer. There's two things I'd like to get a little bit better. I'd like to see a little bit better in the state of the world. One is for the rest of the organization to understand and to listen to the CTO about, hey, we need to make an ongoing investment to make sure our code base is within range. Now, code bases should not be great. They should be great on functionality. They don't need to be, quote, great on non-functional requirements. They need to be good enough for the stage industry of the business. That's a super important point. Software teams should carry technical debt, security debt, quality debt, etc. It's not zero debt. It's not perfect code. That's not a good business answer, but they should be managing it. And so we would love CTOs, sales teams who are always pushing for more on the roadmap, and finance and boards to understand, hey, we have to invest. And it's not just up to the CTO, because the CTO gets a budget of how much they can work on, or they don't have a budget for fixing quality or security, etc. But there's nothing they can do. So I would really like them to, the other parts of the organization to understand. The second way to wave a magic wand is that CTOs have a role to play to this, which is making non-functional requirements understandable to the rest of to their counterparts, even when they're less technical. I don't know if it's an American expression, but it takes two to tango. So, which is to say, in this case, if you want an organization's leaders to understand the state of the technology and what to do about it, non-technologists need to be curious, but technologists need to be clear. If I came to you and said, Mehmet, we need to do service-oriented re-architecture, and it's going to take $20 million, and just trust me, maybe you get it. I don't mean you, but let's say someone less technical. Maybe they get it, maybe not. If you say, we are in the bottom quartile on code quality measured by architectural risk relative to companies of our size and stage, and that bottom quartile puts us at risk, that all of a sudden puts this in context, right? Because now non-technologists can understand what's going on. So that's my wish list. You didn't ask, but I'm going to answer because we're so passionate. Other rest of the organization listen, and CTOs find ways to communicate in a way that makes it easy for them to understand.
Absolutely, because business people, they need to see the things in forms of numbers usually, right? So, so you can relate to that. Of course, to be very frank with you, Matt, of course, things are changing very fast. And of course, business people, they are, at least from my experience, more curious to understand from also technical perspective but what will make them take the decision is the number, right? So you need to show them a number, whether it's increasing revenue, decreasing a risk, whatever it is, right? So increasing valuation also maybe. So this is how business people, they act. Now, want to come to something which, when I was preparing for the episode, it's very interesting. And it is the use of AI generated code in software development today, which is something which also you focus on as well, Matt, right? So, and this is becoming very, very fast. People are adopting different tools. So just for the sake of transparency, we are recording on the 6th of September. Probably this will be at the end of September or maybe beginning of October published. But a couple of weeks ago, I started to see a lot of things around tools like Cursor, AI, and there were like a lot of buzz about Copilot from Microsoft and many other tools, right? So what are the risks, Matt? And especially you talk about investors that, risk that investors should be aware of about when assessing the code base. What are these risks?
Mehmet, you told me to be authentic, so I'm going to be authentic. I will answer, but I'm going to start with another one first, which is what are the benefits? I will start with the benefits.
Okay, sure.
We are emphatically supportive of using generative AI tools for coding. And there are two categories of reasons, but they're huge reasons. One is, used correctly, generative AI tools can produce a meaningful productivity benefit, I should say, for the engineering organization as a whole, at least 10%, based on our studies. Now, there's a lot of hype about some extreme numbers. Even if the number is just 10%, that is an extraordinary impact on product roadmaps, on organizational effectiveness. And it's one of the largest, if not the largest, change and benefit to software development in the last 25 years, certainly as big as the rise of open source code. The other benefit, if one is impact benefit for the organization, the second is benefit for coders. And as you're about to see in a second, we are emphatically believers in humans staying in the loop. So this is not about replacement of coders. This is about helping them do more. Gen AI code can help prototype, can help explain code, especially as you said earlier, when you're trying to figure out what code does. It can help error check. It's like a buddy for peer reviews when you need one. There are so many benefits to the quality of work life for developers. If there were risks, anything comes with risk. If there weren't substantial benefits, who cares? But there are substantial benefits, which is why the risks are really important. And so we think about those briefly. We see 5 main risks, and I'll just share them briefly and happy to talk about any of them in detail. One of them is insufficient use of Gen AI coding tools, leading to an organization not being as effective and not being able to take advantage of the productivity gains as possible. So if everyone else is using Gen AI, which is the case, Gen AI coding tools, and you're not, you could be at least 10% less effective than your competitors. Second is intellectual property risk. If you use coding tools the wrong way, you put the IP at risk, especially, by the way, if you don't manage the tools, which tools developers are allowed to use, and also especially if you're an organization that cares about copyright protection for your software. Third is security risk. All code comes with security risk, whether it's written by humans on the team or open source or a Gen AI tool, but it comes with security risk that needs to be managed. Fourth is maintainability risk, which is to say Gen AI code may not be understandable, and if it's not understandable, it may not be maintained. Again, if used incorrectly, there are definitely ways to manage all these risks. And then fifth is sort of an add-on category, but as you said, for investors, it's really important, which is just exit risk. On top of all of those other reasons, companies, to a much greater extent, to a growing extent, will have to justify their Gen AI use in diligence. And this, I love technology. Sometimes changes quickly and sometimes not. This is a story. Tech due diligence usually doesn't change quickly, but this is a story that basically happened overnight. Less than a year ago, some major software acquirers and software investors decided that they needed to start managing the risk of generative AI in their potential acquisitions or targets. They commissioned an organization, which was SEMA, to build a tool to manage, to measure how much Gen AI was in code bases. And it's now in production and use by a disproportionate share of the world's leading software investors, late stage software investors, private equity, and strategic acquirers. And so now companies, to an increasing degree, are going to have to justify, are they using the right amount of Gen AI? Not too little, not too much. And are they using in the right ways that solve the other four risks?
That's, really interesting, Matt, because if you tell someone about the concept of, auditing the use of Gen AI in coding, probably 2 years ago, someone would say, what? Like, that doesn't make sense to me. But of course, the past 2 years, were really a ride, I would say. So you call this, I think, GBOM, which is Generative AI Bill of Materials, right?
Yes. So the topic of understanding how much generative AI is in the code, we call that Gen AI code transparency. Now, one of the things we learned as we built this is there's a lot of parallels to open source code. What is open source code? Of course, it is code not written by the team. It's written by, in this case, another organization, a community. It's a really good idea to use open source. If you ask the developer, do you think open source is a good idea? They say, absolutely. Why should I reinvent the wheel? It's going to get to higher quality, et cetera, et cetera. So good for coders, good for the code base, good for the organization. But open source comes with risk. It has security risk. It has intellectual property risk. It has operational risk if it's not maintained. Well, guess what? All of that's true for Gen AI. Gen AI code is code that the team did not write. The team prompted it, but the LLM wrote it. So they didn't write it. It comes with huge benefits to the coder and to the organization, and it comes with risk, that risk of security, IP, all those things we said. So a lot of this, a lot of the work on Gen AI risk and benefit management comes straight from open source risk and benefit management. I say that because there's already a term of art, software bill of materials, which refers to, or SBOM, how much open source is in the code base and what are the risks associated with it. We're honored that we invented the Generative AI Bill of Materials, or GBOM, to keep track of how much Gen AI is in the code base. So a slightly longer answer. The topic is Gen AI code transparency. The document form of the output is a GBOM, or Generative AI Bill of Materials.
Absolutely. I can relate to something that happened, I think, 2 or 3 years ago. I can't remember. Regarding the use of open source, there was this famous library called Log4j.
Exactly.
And Log4j was used, I don't know, countless amount of software, because it's an open library that, majority of vendors, software vendors, they rely on. And there was I think there was a vulnerability in one of the versions, and then it was like a mess for almost 6-7 months. And I think the same thing apply here, Matt, when using the generative AI. It's not because the generative AI is bad. I just want to highlight this, and you just did also as well. So this is because this is how software works. Like sometimes it can have bugs. Sometimes it needs to be updated later on. Out of curiosity, Matt, of course, I didn't go deep dive after this, but probably you're seeing this more than me. So people, they generate the code one time, and I have the feeling that, they say, you know what? Our job is done. Like, it generated the code. I don't need to go. It works. Performance is okay. So are you seeing people trying to ask these LLMs, okay, you gave us, for example, version 1, now give me version 2. Like, evaluate your own code and give me version 2. Or let's say, let's enhance and come up with version 3. Are we seeing something like this happening?
It's a really, really good question. To take a step back, there definitely is evidence. I believe it was a Cornell University study, that Gen AI code comes with security warnings, as does all code. Exactly as you said, as does all code. But worrisomely, the developers were more likely to trust it, even though it had security warnings in it. So the "Phew, we're done" phenomenon certainly exists. The good news is, certainly from SEMA's qualitative and quantitative experience, is that certainly the vast majority of professional coders understand that they cannot rely on the code itself. One, they come back and ask for better versions, but I'd say even more importantly, they run it through all of the quality and the security checks that they would any other piece of code, which is exactly how we would think of doing it. It includes high quality security tooling. It includes high quality code quality tooling. It includes code reviews, one of the most important elements of the software development lifecycle, both to improve the code and to spread knowledge and to increase training. Professionally, organizations have gotten the message that you cannot trust Gen AI code alone. You need to put it through, all of the quality gates and, quality broadly defined. A side effect of that, if you think about, just to use our terminology, there's Gen AI originated code. Once it's originated, it could be pure Gen AI code, which is to say that a developer hasn't modified it, or it could be blended, which is to say a developer took it and then modified it to improve these issues, potential issues. Elite organizations, not only manage how much Gen AI originated code there is, but also how much, or really how little, pure Gen AI code there is. Because if you, just an extreme example, Mehmet, if you got a code base and it was 100% coming out of prompts, you should be really nervous. If it had any high stakes purposes, really nervous that, literally by definition, no coder improved it. Impossible that would be the best code. And so Gen AI code transparency includes not only how much Gen AI originated is there, but how much has it been blended as a leading indicator that the development team has the resources and capacity to make that code better and safer.
Got it. Now, a little bit a futuristic question, I would say, because I had this discussion with other guests on the show. Do you see in the future, like Gen AI being more capable of being, doing more than what it just does today, in the sense of software engineers becomes more kind of project managers or product managers, and we have the AI acting as bunch of agents that someone works on this library, the other works on, I don't know, like maybe a user interface, the other working on an API, and someone comes and just check what they are doing. So is this something too much futuristic, do you think, man?
So absolutely, positively, Gen AI coding tools will continue to improve their efficacy, no question. By the time that this podcast is released, they will be better. I mean, the rate of change, and you mentioned this earlier, more than $1 billion have poured into specific Gen AI coding tools, much less I say generic, but they're incredibly powerful and incredibly strong tools like ChatGPT, and not even counting GitHub Copilot, et cetera. So a huge amount of money and resources are being put into this. I take a long view. I studied history. I studied history in college, and I like to bring a historical view. As I mentioned, son of a coder and a math teacher, and my math teacher mom was a coder before that. In the 60s, this is a history lesson, coders used punch cards. Google it if you don't believe it. It kind of looks like a library card. If you even know what that is, I'm so old. I had library cards also that fed ones and zeros into machines that were the size of large rooms.
Right.
By 2010, so many changes happened. But let's just talk about open source. And I like this idea of project management. A coder would not just take requirements from the product team and write every single line by hand. They would say, we're building a web interface. I'm not going to build a framework by hand. I'm going to go to open source and I'm going to find the right one. I would argue that that is a coder serving as a project manager by not doing everything themselves, but by going and finding the right answer. And it doesn't mean that there's no work involved, and it doesn't mean there's not a human in the loop, but it would be bananas. I picked 2010, a period where open source is in use, but not Gen AI code, where they are already project managers. Now, fast forward to today, there's another kind of project management capability, which is now you have Gen AI as an option, AI code as an option, just like Stack Overflow, just like open source. And so the project management nature of coders from the 60s, from the building of the Apollo, mission controls and other systems, is dramatically increased as a percentage of their time. And that rate will continue. I'm just looking at the historical rates. But fundamentally, there still is an incredibly important role for developers in that process. And as much as code is eating the world, there's so much more digitalization to happen. As crazy as that sounds, it's absolutely true. And so there will be plenty of work for coders who are both coding and project managing, just in slightly different percentages, to continue to digitalize and improve the world.
Very interesting point of view, I would say, Matt, which kind of I agree with, to be very frank with you. Now, let's talk, if we can, about value creation for software companies. So there's, I believe, like a technical standpoint and aspect when it comes to, improving the yield of a software company during the acquisition process. So I'm interested to hear from you, Matt, about like how they can do this while balancing between innovation and operations.
Got it. And so we're using the same terms. When you say value creation, you mean, or I would mean it, after an organization has been sold or acquired,
Right.
So a new investor or owner, the period after technical due diligence is done, after the deal is closed,
Yes.
how to make the company better, a company with software assets. Am I thinking about that right?
Yes, 100%.
Absolutely. I like frameworks, so we'll start a little bit on the framework side. Of course, sales is king. And so we want to think about value creation from technology to boost revenue. And then we want to think about cost, and then we want to think about risk. Incredibly straightforward framework, I know. There is almost no organization, I would say no organization, that couldn't benefit from technology serving as an improvement to more revenue and more of the right kinds of revenue. There's just no substitute for building, developing, acquiring the best possible product management function you can. Shout out to Alex and Ankar. I love you guys so much. To really, really listen to customers and prospects on the job to be done. What do they actually need help with? And, what are they saying and what are they not saying about the problems that need to be met? So first and foremost, we try to drive revenue because that always drives that valuation. Can we get better and better and better? It's a continuous process. You're never done with listening to customer requirements, deciding what they should actually be, and then translating that into feeding the engineering team. In terms of risk mitigation, I'm biased, of course. We've done so many tech due diligences, but I think investors are smart, and I think the standards that they care about in diligence really serve as a good, a chart, if you will, a checklist, a credit score of code. Like, you got to care about development process consistency. You got to care about carrying the right amount of technical debt, about code quality, intellectual property risk, etc. Not too advertorial, but you can go. We have some blogs on what metrics to care about. We even have a self-serve calculator. You want to see how you stand up. So we want to educate the world. This, we think, are the right sets of metrics to think about to mitigate the risk, mitigate the risks. And then on cost, this is, I think, true for every department, which is you should always be looking at what are we spending? Are there ways to achieve the same outcomes well? And that's both purchase spend and purchase spend, and of course the team. Friendly reminder: if you are not world class at managing your cloud costs, please go find a consultant. That's not SEMA. We don't do that for a living. Please go find somebody to do it, because it's frequently the low-hanging fruit. If you really bring in an excellent person, whether full-time or a consultant, to improve your bottom line, improve COGS, improve net income without team disruption. So we really like looking at that, early in the whole period.
Absolutely. Again, great insights, Matt. As we are almost coming to an end, just, one thing that I'm curious to know from your perspective, especially with what you're doing currently with SEMA. Other than Gen AI, what do you think some other emerging technologies? Of course, Gen AI is the biggest one. I'm aware of that. But what would be some other aspects that you expect to have great impact on technical due diligence in the future?
On technical due diligence. Okay, I thought you were going to say on value creation or on engineering.
That's right. I came back to tech due diligence. Yeah,
got it. I'm going to cheat a little. You can call me on it. Absolutely. Technical due diligence on the use of generative AI in an organization is a huge trend, of which there are two parts. One is generative AI to write the code. Another is Gen AI in other parts of the business, whether it's part of the product, like a chatbot powered by AI, or whether it's not customer facing, but part of products or operations, underwriting, drug discovery, are all being revolutionized by Gen AI. And so understanding that as part of the technical due diligence process, understanding the use of generative AI is, of course, a major trend. The other one, and I'm cheating your audience, if you can see me, I'm smiling. The other one is using Gen AI in technical due diligence. So document review is fundamentally different because of Gen AI's ability to summarize and synthesize information. It's not 100% accurate. It hallucinates. It's not a substitute for human judgment. It is just a bionic advancement of it, which also, by the way, is exactly how you should think about Gen AI in all cases. Helps humans do better, but you need them. And so we are seeing in the technical due diligence process absolutely being transformed by the ability to use Gen AI tools to understand organizations even better. So I'm a little bit of a one-trick pony. What is changing is Gen AI in tech due diligence, but there are two major components such that tech due diligence today is already quite different from 2 years ago and will be quite different again 2 years in the future.
Fantastic. Finally, Matt, anything you want to leave us with today? Maybe something I didn't touch base on, and where people can get in touch with you and find more about SEMA.
What a great question. You're such a great interview, Mehmet. Nothing new comes on, but I think comes to mind, but I would really emphasize a point you made, which is making code engineering understandable to the rest of your organization. If you are not currently one way or the other you as CTO, not currently able to contextualize and synthesize the state of engineering into dollars and cents, relative comparisons, traffic lights, things that a non-technical expert can look at. If you can't put it all in half of a page, the state of what's going on in engineering, half a page with terminology that's very simple, you have work to do. And so there are ways to do that, of course, we would be happy to help. But CTOs put in the effort to make it understandable, like Mehmet said, and that you'll pay off huge dividends for your organization. So that's why if I had to say one last thing, I would leave it with that. To find us, I would be delighted to talk with any of your listeners individually. If you go to semasoftware.com, you can see it semasoftware.com, one word. Any of the contact us buttons will find us. You can also find me on LinkedIn at MVI, LinkedIn/in/MVI, Matt Van Itallie. Any of the find us buttons will get to me. I would be delighted to talk to any of your listeners.
Thank you very much, Matt, for this insightful episode today, and something which we didn't touch base on before. So this is like kind of a great use case for a lot of startup founders, for a lot of even like properly, software houses as they call them, right? So because they need to be aware of this topic also as well. So great insights. For the listeners, all the links that Matt just mentioned, you can find them in the show notes, or if you're watching this on YouTube, you'll find them in the description. And again, Matt, really, I enjoyed this conversation with you today. So, I hope we can do another episode also in the future, because I think this is a very, very hot topic. And this is usually how I end my episode. This is for the audience. If you just discovered this podcast by luck, thank you for passing by. If you liked what you heard or what you saw today, please give us a thumb up and subscribe, share it with your friends and colleagues. And if you are one of the people who keep coming back, they keep sending me their feedback, their suggestions, thank you for doing so. Keep them coming. I read all your notes, remarks, and I try to take action on the thing that I can do. So thank you for doing this. And as I say always, thank you for tuning in. We'll meet again very soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Hit that subscribe button, share the show with your tech-savvy friends and fellow entrepreneurs, and leave us a review on your favorite podcast app. Your support means the world to us.